Hello, or should I say good evening, or hi, or welcome. This is Wordpath, the show about Oklahoma Indian languages and the people who are preserving and teaching them. Tonight our topic is different ways of greeting. But before we start, I want to share with you what I did last weekend. I went up to Ponca City for the dedication of the Standing Bear statue. This was on October 26th. And there's a whole history behind this. I wanted to briefly tell it so that you would know that if you might be interested in going up and seeing the statue, which was just dedicated. In 1878, the Poncas were grabbed out of Nebraska by the federal government, army and so forth, and marched down to Oklahoma, much against their will. By the end of the year, 158 of the 730 Poncas had died, mostly of diseases in this unfamiliar and rather inhospitable territory that they had been plunked into. And of these 158 dead, the son of one of the leaders at the time, Standing Bear, was one of those who had died. And Standing Bear, who was one of several important leaders at the time, had promised his son that he would take him back to Nebraska, to his homeland, to bury him there. And so he set out with some of his cohort and with his son's body and went back towards Nebraska. Well, the army caught him. He was arrested and imprisoned. And there was a very important trial which ensued, during which Standing Bear basically was asking for protection under the Constitution as a human being who had rights to due process and so forth and shouldn't have been detained in this way. And this was a big issue because at the time, an Indian in the United States was not considered a human being. At least there had not been any case which established this as part of the definition of human being, believe it or not. This whole trial and the story that led up to it is documented in a book called The Trial of Standing Bear by Thomas Tibbles. And the upshot of it was that Standing Bear won the trial. He had some very impressive speeches during the course of the trial, and there's an excellent movie that was made about this, by the way. And the decision was, yes, indeed, an Indian is a human being. Talk about greetings. Hello. An Indian is a human being. And this has been very important in terms of case law in Indian rights within the United States ever since. So this was very important in terms of Native American civil rights. And it certainly does warrant, I think, dedicating a huge monument. And what they did is they commissioned an artist named Orland Joe, who is, I believe, Ute and Navajo. There was a contest to decide who would make the statue, but he was the one that was commissioned. There's a 22-foot tall brass, bronze statue of Standing Bear. It's a glorious, wonderful monument, and it's in a rather large park at the corner of Route 177 and Route 60, which is just on the south side of Ponca City itself, which puts it right between downtown Ponca City and the Ponca community of White Eagle to the south, which I think is very interesting and important symbolism there as well. Anyway, I recommend that you go and see it. There was a wonderful ceremony. There was a certain amount of Ponca spoken at the ceremony. One of our previous guests, Parrish Williams, was on the dais with the honored guests, and he gave a blessing all in Ponca, which was quite beautiful. And some other people spoke a little bit of their languages while they were there. A lot of distinguished Indian and non-Indian guests. It was a wonderful day, and I recommend that you go and see it if you're up in the Ponca City area. Now, let's get to tonight's topic. We're going to look at the form and function of greeting someone in human language. Then we'll look more closely at greetings in some of the Native American languages of Oklahoma. I have with me a T-shirt. There's a catalog, mail-order catalog, called Audio Forum, which operates out of Guilford, Connecticut. They sell language tapes and booklets and so forth. And I got this T-shirt from them some time back. It shows greetings in languages from around the world, not so much Indian languages, but we've got Swahili, French, Swedish, Norwegian, and a number of Portuguese I see on the back here and so forth. And I thought I would show it. I've heard that since the time that I got this T-shirt, they've come out with a second one which concentrates on Native American languages. I think it's all Native American languages. And I think there are greetings on the front and closings or goodbyes on the back. This one has more greetings on the back. Let me show you. So you can see that there are lots of, apparently, I don't know most of these languages and I couldn't read them to you. I couldn't identify every language without the guide that they give you. But you can see that apparently there are many brief ways to say hello in all the languages of the world. We've got shalom and bom dia and buenos dias and guten tag and good day and so forth. But there are two things about this that are actually a little bit misleading, and it'll sort of get us into what's interesting about tonight's topic, I think. And that is that it's never quite that simple. There's seldom only one way to say hello, and there's more to the story than that. Once you say hello, what is it considered appropriate for the person you've greeted to say back to you? That will vary from language to language and from situation to situation as well. So we're going to look at we'll get a little bit for context. We'll sort of look at greetings in languages of the world a little bit. Then we'll look at Native American languages of Oklahoma, and as well as English language, which is spoken in Oklahoma, of course, as background. Native American languages next. And then we'll talk a little bit about how even such a simple matter as how do you say hello, basically, can get you into some pretty interesting discussion. It brings up important issues in language preservation, believe it or not. Now, I gave a paper on this topic, which a few years back, it was at the American Culture Association meetings in San Antonio in 1991, and I called the paper, How Many Ways to Say Howdy? And I'll just show you. I could just tell you, but let me just show you how I spelled howdy in the title of the paper. I put the DY in parentheses because in that paper, as I'll do tonight, I wanted to bring special attention to Native American languages. And it's actually not so much a joke of thinking about saying how as a way of a Native American way of saying hello. In fact, not only Native American languages, but a whole lot of any language around the world, there's very, very frequent way of saying hello is how something. How are you feeling, how do you do, something like that is very, very common. And how, I believe, was picked up from one of the Northern Plains languages in the U.S. and became sort of stereotypical for how Indians say hello. Obviously, again, it's a huge oversimplification. But a lot of the greetings do translate as how something or other. So how and howdy is to cover the English and the Native American language variation that I had in mind. I've continued ever since then to collect greetings and to think about this whole notion of how we greet each other and what that kind of means socially and culturally. And if you've probably noticed if you've been watching Wordpath that at the beginning of each program, I usually ask the guests to start us off by telling us how they would greet someone in their language. And sometimes, not always, I've remembered to ask them what would that person then say back. And kind of if I happen to know that there's some variations, kind of discuss some of the more interesting variations on the greetings. What I found out in my research for that paper before, and what's been confirmed since then, is that there are a whole lot of just many, many interesting ways to greet people, depending on the language you're speaking and the culture you're in. So that even within one language, like say English, the greetings are somewhat different in England than they are in the United States, and there may be different greetings in Australia and so forth. So it's a matter of language, but also sort of the sub-language or dialect or the culture that you're in when you're speaking that language. Just to give a few examples from around the world. In Spanish and in Polish, and also in English and a lot of other languages, you say something like good day as a greeting. So you're not exactly saying the day is good. It's more like, I think, wishing that the day will be good for someone. Wishing someone a good day is probably what's behind that. In English, we have some variations on that because we can say good day, which sounds a little British or formal to me, but we can say good morning, good afternoon, good evening as well as greetings, depending on what time of day it is, so we have sub-variations. But some form of good day or something like that is quite common. In Chinese, there are 3 common greetings. This I don't know from first-hand experience, but this is what I've read, that there are 3 common greetings that literally translated means something like, have you eaten? For the first one. The second one, where are you going? And the third one, you have come. Now, none of these are common greetings in English, so they might sound funny at first, but the more languages you look at, it's amazing how many languages have something along the same lines that they use as greetings. Have you eaten? Where are you going? You have come. In Aztec, which is still spoken by quite a few people in Mexico mostly, you say, "Keni no timotlatwilti," which literally means, how did you get up? And that always makes me chuckle. It's sort of like saying, it's almost as if the person would say, my gosh, you look so awful, I can't imagine how you got out of bed today. But I don't think that connotation is there at all. That's just my imagination. But how did you get up? Again, here's another one that starts with how, if you translate it literally. In Thai, spoken in Thailand, the commonest greeting is sawatdee kap if you're a man, or sawatdee ka if you're a woman. Those little particles on the ending just distinguish men's and women's speech in general. And I would usually say something like sawatdee ka, and you do this hand gesture with it you know, in English we commonly would wave or maybe not make any gesture. In Thailand you would say Sawatdee Ka. This is called a Y, this particular kind of gesture. It's kind of a symbol of politeness and modesty and respect. I don't know that Sawatdee Ka really means anything. I'm not sure, actually. But the response is the same. You say back Sawatdee Ka, or if you're a man, Sawatdee Krap. But sometimes people also ask in Thai something that means, where are you going? And the usual answer is, oh, just around. In other words, you don't take it too literally. There's just sort of a ritual. This is what you say, this is what you say back. And this is typical of greetings. So you may ask, where are you going? Or you may say, where have you been? Again, the answer is probably just around. It's just a way of interacting. You know, you're asked a token question, you give the usual answer. Just as in English, when you say, how are you? Sometimes we use how are you as the first thing we say to someone, as a greeting. And they don't usually say exactly how they are. They don't take it too literally. It's just, you ask the question, they give the usual answer, which is fine. How are you? Fine. How are you? Fine. You know, that's just the way it goes. That's the custom. And there's another in Thailand also. In Thai, sometimes people will say, how are you, or are you well? And the usual answer is, I'm fine, just as in English. Now, in northern Mexico, there's a tribe called Raramuri. Whoops, it's a tongue twister. Raramuri, I believe it's pronounced. They live in northern Mexico, and the men, so I've read again, often greet each other with a greeting that literally means, what did you dream last night? I thought that one was really quite interesting, and seems to indicate that dreaming is very important in that culture, because so many greetings ask about the other person's welfare. And so apparently, if I had to guess, and I know nothing about this culture specifically, but it sort of gives the impression, I'll say, that dreaming is probably very important and considered very closely related to your welfare and how you're doing. And finally, I visited Thailand once, and I talked about Thai a minute ago, but there are a number of other languages spoken there, including native languages of native hill tribes that live in the area. And one such tribe is called the Lisu. They immigrated into Thailand from China some years ago, but you can still see perhaps some influence. My sister was telling me, who was living there at the time, was telling me that they use Chinese numerals, for instance. Even though they speak Thai, they'll use Chinese numerals. Anyway, I asked a Lisu man, how would you greet someone, wondering if it would be if it would be the same as in Thai, or if perhaps they would use the Thai greeting since they were now living in Thailand. And he said, well, usually we ask either, where are you going, or what did you eat? I think that's the first, what did you eat, that's come up. That's another one I've come across in a number of languages. So this is some of the very interesting variation. People seem to ask each other often a ritual question, not even meant literally necessarily, but a question to which there's usually a ritual answer. But it often has to do with a similar semantic range. It wishes you a good day, or it asks for some information about your well-being or your recent activities, and the answer is usually a kind of a set, not taken too literally, but you just answer what you're supposed to answer. Let's look more closely at English for a moment. You might think in English that, of course, we say hello. I mean, sort of what this show is about is how to say hello, but also the many variations of hello. So hello is one of our main greetings. It's kind of a generic greeting that anyone can use with anyone on almost any occasion. But we also say hi, which is a little less formal. Let me just to show a little of the variation, give you some other options that we have in English. We can say hello or hi. Of course, we can say howdy. We also say sometimes, how do you do? That's slightly formal sounding to me. Or a little less formal version of that, simply, how are you? We use that as a greeting sometimes. Sometimes we first greet by saying hello. We exchange hellos, and then we say, how are you? In that case, we're more likely to really want to know how you are. But if you use how are you as a greeting, it's usually a ritual thing, and we really aren't asking how someone is. We just want them to say, fine, how are you? So that we can do the little exchange as we do when we greet each other. We also have, as I said before, depending on the time of day, we can say good morning, afternoon, or evening. And that you have that option in a number of other languages as well. And we can say some kind of folksy ones like howdy or hey. People use hey an awful lot. And then even more kind of slangy ones like yo or what do you know? And usually when you ask someone, what do you know, when you greet them by saying, what do you know, you don't want to know everything they know, you just want to say hi. And there's a ritual response, which is usually not much, or something like that. How about you? How about yourself? Something like that is the usual response. So to sum up what I've just said and some other languages I've researched as well, this is what I found. In spite of these very interesting variations, which at first seem so exotic to the English ear, it really turns out that languages show a fairly limited set of general strategies to greet people. One very common pattern is that there's a unique greeting token, as I call it. This would cover something like hello or hi. A unique token. In other words, it's a word that doesn't have any other meaning. It's not a sentence. It's not asking a question. It's just what you say. It just means I greet you, like hello. It doesn't mean anything but hello. Another pattern is, and in this case, usually the response is to repeat that unique token right back. Another pattern is to wish the other person well. So good day, good morning, top of the morning to you, and so forth would come under that heading. Another pattern is to simply note the person's or your own arrival. I think I mentioned one example of that before. We'll come up with another one in a minute from Ponca, where you just say, when you arrive somewhere and want to greet someone, you say, well, I got here, or I came, and that's your greeting. And the other person might say, oh, you're here, or oh, you got here. And that's the greeting exchange in that kind of case. Another pattern is you inquire as to the welfare of the other person. This is extremely common, as in when you say, how do you do, how are you, how do you feel, something like that. And another one is to ask for news or recent events that relate to the person. Where have you been? Where did you come from? Have you eaten? What did you eat? And that sort of thing. What's happening, meaning what's been happening to you lately. In other words, asking for news from the person. Although you don't necessarily want to get the news, because usually they're just going to say, oh, not much. That's the typical pattern. So the usual responses are fairly predictable, given whichever greeting is chosen to greet someone. As I said, if you're asking where a question has been asked, whether it's how are you or what's happening or whatever, the usual response is going to be sort of generic, or it's just sort of a set thing. So if you ask how are you, the usual response, not only in English but in lots of languages which have parallel greetings, the usual response is going to be fine, or fine, how are you? If you ask what's been happening, the usual response is going to be not much. If the response is where have you been or where are you going, it's going to be probably just around. That's the typical kind of pattern. So it's kind of predictable and ritualized. This point is made very effectively on a public radio show. I don't know if you've heard the show, What Do You Know? There's a kind of a comedy show. The host is Michael Feldman. Shows on public radio Saturdays here in Norman. It's called What Do You Know? And Michael Feldman opens every program by saying, well, what do you know? And the audience, all of them in unison, say back to him, not much, you? Which just sort of emphasizes, well, this is the beginning of our interaction. We've greeted each other. We know what we're doing. We've done the exchange. Now let's get on with the show. I think that's very cute. It is a very interactive show, too, sort of conversational in tone. So it's appropriate to greet that way at the beginning. Now, let's review some of the greetings that we've heard so far on the Wordpath show. If you've been watching, you've heard lots of different people speaking various languages from different areas or different dialects of the same language. And I always ask them, how do you say hello in your language? And these are just some of the things that they've told us. In Cherokee, you say, oh, si yo. As far as I know, that's like hello or hi. I believe it's just a unique greeting token, doesn't mean anything else. And the usual response is to say it back, just like hello or hi. And there's a shorter version, si yo, which is used more in some dialects than others. And you just say si yo back. Then there's Comanche, where you say maruawe, which literally means tell it. And I think the idea behind that, this is how it's been explained to me, is tell us about it. In other words, what's your news? What's been going on? Let us know what's happening. And you don't really let the other person know what's happening. You respond by saying maruawe back to them, tell it. Or you might say, hoitsavensa, how about yourself? And there's a second greeting in Comanche, a little shorter and perhaps less formal, or just shorter, I guess, really. And that is you just say, huh. It almost sounds like hi in English, but it's huh. And the response is, huh, right back. Again, it's a unique greeting token. In Oto, we learned that if you're male, you say ho. And if you're female, you say ha. And as far as I know, those are also unique greeting tokens. There probably are other variants in Oto, but these are the ones we were taught on the show by Truman Black. So he said to me, ho, and I said back to him, ha. In Chickasaw, you say, halito. And I think that's just an unanalyzable, just a unique greeting token also. You say halito right back. It's the same in Choctaw, which is a very closely related language. Happens to be the same word in those two. In Caddo, you say quahat, which literally means just fine. And the idea as it's been explained to me is you're asking if the other person is okay. And the usual response is to say ahey, which means yes, I'm just fine. There's another one that says sina saanta, also in Caddo, which means literally, do you have any? And the usual response is to say, well, there's a kind of, you usually say the same thing back, actually, but it does literally mean, do you have any? So sometimes the response is to answer the question, and there's a kind of Caddo joke. You answer it, you kind of laugh, and you say, kubanta, nah, I don't have any. But I think it's kind of also probably, not sort of subconsciously, kind of a way of asking Muse, what, have you got anything? What's going on with you? Something like that. And you say, nah, nothing, not much, is basically the kind of response you're giving. Now, in both, I forgot to mention in Comanche, and this also applies to Caddo, you also have, for anything that actually is not a unique token, but actually is a question, you have two extra variants, because you have not only a singular form, but you have a dual form if you're talking to two people, and a plural if you're talking to three or more people. So that gives you more variation. In Kiowa, we were taught to say, hoi po hyomdo, how are you feeling? And then there's a more informal version. I'm just beginning to study Kiowa some, and I found this in my notes with a rather incomplete note about it, but apparently you can say, tsomo. And I don't know too much about that one, but it was noted that it was more informal. In Ponca, if you're a man, you say, aho, and a lot of other tribes have picked up this Ponca greeting as well. If you're a woman, there really isn't a unique greeting token like aho that just means hello. So women usually don't have a form for hello, but I have heard that some women use the form hawe, which it was later explained to me, well, someone was kind of putting them down for saying it that way. They said, it's not really Ponca, that's Osage. So this is an interesting case where a greeting has been borrowed from one language into another. Apparently there just was not a handy token, unique token for females. Aho was only used by men, so hawe, which was used by Osage women in the neighborhood, was picked up by some Ponca women. And others don't think it's right to use it because it's not really Ponca. Another thing you can do in Ponca, and Parrish Williams did this on the tape when I went and visited him at his house, is you can do this I came, you came kind of exchange. So when I was coming up to the door, I said, Parrish, ati, which means I came. And he said, aho, dati, which means you came. And that was our greeting exchange. And finally, in Potawatomi, we were taught that you say, hao nikan, which means I'm not sure if that's analyzable, but it's the main greeting, and there's a hand gesture that usually goes with that, which is this kind of thing. It sort of has become stereotyped in the movies as how Indians say hi. Perhaps it's, I don't know if it's actually the Plains Indian Sign Language standard for a greeting or not. I wouldn't be surprised if it was. But the Potawatomi teacher showed us that it's good to say hao nikan and do this at the same time. Now remember, it can be tricky finding out as a language student, those of you who are language students, what all the ins and outs of the greetings are. If you just say to your teacher, how do you say hello, they'll probably give you one answer. And you might think that's the whole story, but let me just warn you that it's probably not the whole story. The best thing to do is to expect some variation. Try to observe different situations, men talking, women talking, people talking across different social class, talking to one person, greeting two people, greeting three or more people in languages that make those distinctions. And don't expect to find all the greetings in the dictionary. After all, how many English dictionaries have words like hey or howdy or yo or what do you know, which is a whole sentence? That's probably not going to be in a dictionary. It's the kind of thing you simply have to observe. You need to observe fluent speakers speaking and interacting in real conversational context before you really have control of this. So I'm going to continue collecting from various speakers of different languages and from different geographical areas the many ways of saying hello in the Native American languages of Oklahoma. And in closing, let's review some of the greetings we've learned so far on Wordpath. In other words, in closing, I'd like to say hello.
In Cherokee, the way you say hello is osayo. And then now there comes the dialectal form, which is the style that I talk, which is a contracted form, an abbreviated form. And the proper greeting there would be sayo.
Linda, first of all, could you tell us how we would greet a person in the Creek language? How do you say hello?
Hishjay.
Richard, to start off, could you tell us how to greet someone in Comanche?
You would say Mareawe, but
Mareawe.
Comanche is more specific that if you're talking to two people, saying, if you're going to say hello to two people, you'd say Mareawe, and then three people, or three or more, it would be Mareawe ka.
Truman, could you teach us how we would do a greeting in Oto?
For the male, you say ho. For the female, you say ha. So in the language, you have a male speech, and then you have a female speech as well.
So you would say to me,
male
ho.
is ha,
I say
ho,
that.
and the female is
Ha. I'm sorry, I missed my... Can you start us off by teaching us how do you say hello in Chickasaw?
To say hello in Chickasaw is halito.
Halito. Ranlet, could you teach us how to greet someone in Caddo? What do you say for hello?
You say kwahat, kwahat.
Kwahat. And if I say kwahat to you, what do you say back?
Sinasa anta, which means, are you okay too?
To start us off, could you teach us just a brief greeting, the way that you might say hello to a friend if you saw them in Kiowa?
Oh, the only, in God, the only Bobon, you can say it two ways. And I'm glad to see y'all, glad to be with y'all, so hard. Be God, to hope we continue to visit as such as we go down the road of life.
Parish, Ati.
Oh, Ati. Yeah, Didi.
One of the first things we learned how to say was a greeting. And what was that? Howdy, and we always said that it had to be, you had to hold up your hand.
Well, you ask a person, hoi bohyumda, which essentially asks, how are you doing, or how are you doing?
Okay.
And usually the response is, if you're feeling good, apohyumda.
Start us off by teaching us a greeting in your language.
I guess one of the most frequently used is this real simple word. It says stungo, which means basically, how are you?
Wa pele madaole keta. Na hene yo hene, na hene yo hene, ana magwana keta. Wa pele madaole keta. Na hene yo hene, na hene yo hene, ana magwana keta. Wa pele madaole keta.